In this video, I'm gonna help you finally get over the anxiety to pick up the phone and make a cold call. When I started as an SDR, I was terrified to make a dial. But over the last 6 years, I made 50,000 cold calls, had thousands of conversations, and booked hundreds of meetings through the phone. And what I figured out after coaching 400 reps is most people aren't afraid of calling itself. They're afraid of the underlying issues and meaning that they've attached to the call. Somewhere along the way, their self-worth got attached to the outcome of a random call and what a stranger thinks about them. So in this video, I'm gonna break down why this happens, what you can do to fix it, and the exact steps I followed to get over my fear and start booking meetings through the phone. So the first thing to understand is that you're not actually afraid of calling, you're just afraid of the unknown. And the reason for this is, us as people, we just hate ambiguity. We hate not knowing what the end outcome is gonna be. And when we pick up the phone, we don't know what's gonna happen. You don't know if you're gonna get a yes, you don't know if you're gonna get a no, you don't know if it's gonna be a follow-up or if you're gonna get told to fuck off, right? There's no way to figure out what it is or what's gonna happen in the middle of that call. So when you go into the phone, you're constantly fearing and that anxiety builds up before, right? Like if you're constantly thinking, oh, what are they gonna say to me? Are they gonna be rude? Am I gonna book a meeting? That anxiety builds up and that becomes a reason why you don't wanna pick up the phone because you start procrastinating, you start making up scenarios, you start thinking worst case, and that sort of paralyzes you to where you never pick up the phone. So what you need to be doing, and again, like this only happens because you're focused on the outcomes, you're focused on, am I gonna book the meeting or is it gonna be a no? So what you need to flip to is input-based thinking, right? And a lot of people will say like focus on the inputs, but not actually explain what to do. So me personally, I always like to focus on a completion, right? So a completion is, it's not based off you booking a meeting, it's not based off anything like that. It's literally, did I speak to the right person? Did they have an issue? And then either, did I book a meeting, which is yes. Was it a no? Was it a not right now? And it's worth a follow-up. That's it. Like those are literally the outcomes. You either book the meeting, you get told no, or you get told no for now and have a reason to follow back up. And when you start thinking like this, it sort of kills the stress that you have going into it because a lot of the pressure, again, is attached to you really worrying about the worst case scenario. But the reality is you accept that the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get told a no. And you will get told no's. But when you go into it not fearing the unknown and you know you're going to get one of those 3 buckets no matter what, and you're expecting that when you pick up the phone, you sort of lose the anxiety to pick it up and you can just get into the habit of making the dials. And again, like when you start making the dials, the rest of it becomes 10 times easier. So I think the core thing is to just really focus on not worrying about the outcome and focusing on something in your control, whether that's a completion like I've just gone through or even having a conversation with a prospect. The second thing is what I like to call the ego trap, right? And I think this one is more prevalent now than ever before because when you're making cold calls, it's tough, all right? Like not many people are built for sales, not many people are built to do it. And in day-to-day life, it's very rare that you face a lot of rejection, right? Like even if you're on dating apps, you just swipe left, swipe right, it doesn't really take a hit to your ego compared to the 70s where you go to a bar and get told no to your face, right? Like it's very rare to feel that rejection in your day-to-day. So we've naturally built up egos, and even from our childhoods, right? Like if you were, competitive in school, I struggled with this one massively. I was into every single sport. My whole identity was being a winner, right? Like I hated losing, I still do now. So my self-worth and ego and identity was wrapped up in winning at no cost, and I have to win no matter what, right? And then I think when you have this mindset coming into cold calling, it's very dangerous. Again, like this video is more so if you're new to sales, because I think this affects more new people than it does seasoned professionals. But even seasoned professionals who've been closing deals for years, then have to get back on the phone, this can happen, right? So when your identity is attached to winning, you're focused on the end outcome, right? Like when you're thinking about sports, when you're thinking about games, when you're thinking about anything in general, the end outcome is to win that game, right? So in calling, you attach this to booking a meeting. The issue that comes with that is when you're focused on booking a meeting with a cold call, that's something you can't control. Like you cannot control whether your prospect says yes or no. Can you influence their decision? 100%, right? Like that's the whole point of sales skills. If you're better at persuasion, psychology, questioning, being empathetic on the phone, like all of these skills can really help you to swing the ball in your favor. But in reality, you can't guarantee they're gonna say yes. So if your ego and identity is attached to, I need to book a meeting, when you get the rejections, and you're guaranteed to get rejections, that will be a hit to your ego. And when you have that hit to your ego, it's going to deflate you and make you think you're not good enough and make you want to stop dialing and stop picking up the phone. And this is the biggest trap, right? Because if you're constantly focused on end outcomes and your whole thing is about winning, you're naturally not going to be able to get in enough reps to get the end output. So what you need to do instead is, as we've gone through in the first step, flip it to something in your control. Again, like a lot of the best sports people, the best business people in the world, they're ruthless with their process, right? Like they focus on getting the reps in. If you look at Ronaldo, his training is hyper disciplined, right? Like he focuses on everything he can control. Of course, he wants to win the match, but he can't dictate that, right? He can have an influence, but it's not all in his control. So again, when you're dialing, when you're picking up the phone, really think about what things are in your power, what can you control, and that's what you should be attaching your identity to. Did I do everything in my power to set this conversation up to potentially book? And if you did that, that's a great conversation, but that's the mindset we need to be approaching cold calling with instead of focusing on a meeting at all costs. And this point is sort of an attachment to the last one we've just gone through, but it's to just accept and expect rejection. Even if you're an incredible cold caller, I'm talking top 0.01% on the phone, and you have a 40% conversion from every conversation you have, 4 out of 10 book a meeting, 40%. You would be one of the best cold callers around, and you're still getting told no 6 times out of 10. So if you're going into your dial-in sessions, your call blocks, thinking that you have to book a meeting, can you see why you're gonna fail? And again, like these aren't just arbitrary metrics. Even looking at the reports done by Gong, where they analyze hundreds of millions of cold calls, the stats was even above 20% is good from conversation to meeting booked. So the key thing you have to remember is you'll be having conversations, you'll be talking to prospects, but what you really need to understand is you're gonna get told no, you're gonna get told to fuck off, and that's just part of the game. When I started in sales, I was 18, I was doing a commission-only sales job, and my first true thing I was selling was charities in COVID. Looking back, probably not the best opportunity at the time that I could have done, but I was grateful because they taught me about processes and systems and how to actually think about sales like a game, because ultimately it just comes down to math, right? But anyway, the amount of no's, and some of the no's I got were horrific looking back, right? Like imagine you have a face mask on, you're trying to social distance, and you have to stop somebody in the street to get them to sign up for a charity. Like it just wasn't making the most sense. But when you go through something like face-to-face sales or knocking doors, picking up the phone becomes very easy. But what you have to remember is in sales, for what we're actually doing, we are massively overcompensated. Of course, we bring in a ton of value. That's why we get paid what we do. But you look at doctors who are literally operating on somebody, and if they fuck up, they die. We pick up the phone, right? And we call some CFO. And if we mess up, we don't book a meeting. Like the world still goes. So just truly stop thinking about it as this massive thing, because when you attach a lot of worth to it and a lot of pressure to it, you're building external pressure, which naturally messes with your mindset and your approach to going into the dial block. So just really, really, really focus on how can I control my inputs? What inputs do I need to focus on? And sales can literally become maths, right? Like when you figure out that ratio between dial to connect rate, to connect to conversation to meeting, it becomes easy. And this is the last point, which is learn your law of averages. As I was just saying, like when I did face-to-face sales, the biggest concept they taught me was something called law of averages. So the job before that, technically, that was my second job. My first job, I was standing in a Costco and I had to stop people again in COVID. And I literally got one sale in 2 months and made $250. Like that was my entire commission. It was awful, right? And I was so scared. I didn't approach one person. I would stand there with this face mask on and just wait for people to stop for me, which obviously they're not gonna do, right? And the reason I was so crippled to do anything is I just, where I was from standing there to getting a deal closed, the gap was absolutely huge, right? And this principle applies to cold calling. You staring at the phone and all these list of contacts here at point A, looking at point B of booking a meeting, right? That gap is huge. There's so much that goes on in between that. And because the gap is big in your head, again, you keep building it up to be this big thing. So what we want to do instead is learn that law of averages. So law of averages, it's consistent input with the same process equals a consistent output. Again, Sam Ovens, incredible just business person in general, but the equation that he runs through is input times process equals output. then you use feedback to iterate. So again, you have your input, which is your dials, the quality of your list, your process, which is your sales script, how you're handling it, right? Like this is the controllables about skill, and that's going to give you an output. Then you use the feedback to iterate either the input or the process. So law of averages, when it comes to calling, instead of saying, I need to book 10 meetings this month, you just reverse engineer the numbers. So you say that, okay, if I book, let's just go with 1 in 4, 25%, right? And I need to book 10 meetings. That means that I need to have 40 conversations in the month. Because if I have 40 conversations, 25% of those are going to be meetings, right? So again, we know our ratio. Then let's say, we have a 50% connect to conversation ratio. So half the people who pick up the phone and we connect with, we end up having an in-depth conversation for over 3 minutes with, right? Like that's connect to conversation ratio. So if that's 50%, and we know we need 40 conversations, that means we need 80 connects in the month, right? Because 80 connects, 50% ratio equals 40 conversations, 25% connect to conversation to meeting ratio equals the 10 meetings, which is our output. Then all you have to do is work out your dial rate. So let's say we have a 5% connect rate. So 5 out of 100 prospects are actually going to pick up the phone, which is quite standard for where we're at right now, especially if you're doing B2B like I do myself. So now we have all of the stats we need, right? So 5%, that means that's 1,600 dials. 1,600 dials for the month equals 80 people who are going to connect, which equals 40 conversations, which equals 10 meetings. Now, you're probably thinking like, how the fuck do you figure out these numbers, right? Like, it's pretty hard to just pull them out of nowhere. Number one, you should look at your previous stats. A lot of you will already be making dials. You'll already have software. So look back, like look in your CRM, look in your Nooks, look in your dialing tool and look at your stats. It will show these ratios. So you can figure out your own benchmarks. Your stats may be different. You may have a 10% connect to meeting ratio. You may have a 20% dial to connect ratio. You may have great data, but the point is look at your own data first. Now, if you don't have any data at all, number two is look at your team. So look at the people around you. Look at other reps who are making dials. So if you're newer to a role, or let's say you haven't tracked any of your metrics, what's your team stats? How is your team performing? Because they're selling your product to your ICP. They're the closest people to you. So it's also going to be the most accurate. And then the last place to look is industry benchmarks. But in sales, there's so much nuance, so much context that has to be applied that they're probably not going to be the most accurate. Okay, so again, like 1,600 dials for the month in our example, all you have to do is divide that by 20. Now, quick maths, if we divide it by 10, that's 160, 80 dials a day. There we go. You can tell I did well in maths. But the point is, we've suddenly gone from saying, okay, this month I need to book 10 meetings, to saying, this month I need to make 80 dials a day for the 20 working days of the month, and I'm guaranteed to hit my 10 meetings so long as I maintain the stats that I did last month. Which one's easier? Obviously the latter. So then there's no anxiety to dial because you just need to get your fucking dials in. You just need to hit 80 dials a day, which is very easy. Like, that's in your control. You can do that. Instead of thinking, oh, I need to book, like 2 meetings this week, maybe 3. Again, like that is where the anxiety comes from. It's what you're focusing on. So if you learn your law of averages, if you work out the stats, work out your numbers, it becomes a lot easier to truly figure out the process that's going to get you to the end outcome. So again, just remember that you have your inputs times by your process, which gives you an output. Then you use the feedback to iterate and see what you need to do. And again, like just a little bonus tip, when you do this exercise to find your law of averages, there's always going to be one of these stats which is behind, right? Like I mentioned, you may have an incredible connect to conversation ratio, but your conversation to meeting ratio may be well below your team or industry averages. That's your focus point. You need to work on your script, your discovery, your pitch, because that's how you're going to improve, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if it's the other way around, you have an incredible conversation to meeting ratio, but an awful connect to conversation ratio, then you need to work on your opener. So this way it becomes mechanical to figure out what do you need to focus on, what area do you need to work on to get the leverage back to improve. So again, like that's how you're going to iterate, that's how you're going to improve. And it ties into the last step. And this one's not so much about pure, anxiety to pick up the phone, but I think it's still important, which is knowing how to improve. So many reps get disheartened because they get told by the manager, make some dials, they pick up the phone, they make dials, they get destroyed, they don't want to do it again because they don't see a path to how they're getting better. They don't see how today's work is going to impact tomorrow's outcomes. So what I want you to do is use the feedback loop. Look at your stats, look at the real metrics, look at the gaps. What's the biggest drop off? And that becomes your one focus point, your one lever. And again, like just a quick exercise to help really emphasize this point. Let's say you have, a 5% conversation to meeting ratio, and the rest of your team is at 25%. Your connect to conversation ratio is on par, slightly better than them, but that's the drop off. Even if you get it to 20%, that is a 4x. Meaning, if you keep everything else the same, if you stay exactly as good as you are in every other area, improve nothing else, but that one stat of conversation to meeting ratio, you're gonna book 4 times more meetings. That's how you figure out a path to improve. Like, that's huge, 4x. So if you're doing 3 meetings a month, you'd be doing 12 by fixing that one stat. So when you actually know what to work on, you can become mechanical and ruthless with where to prioritize your time. Because when you know how to get better, cold calling doesn't become this daunting task of picking up the phone, getting told to fuck off and just being depressed all day. It becomes a process. You can make it into a system. And again, if this video has taught you anything, let it be that you need a process. When you really figure out what's my input goal, that's how you're going to remove the anxiety. If you're focused and your whole ego and identity is wrapped up in, I need to book meetings, and your self-worth is naturally attached to winning and competing, you're going to lose. You need to compete on something you can control. You need to learn the numbers so you can actually map that progression, and you need to figure out what to focus on every single day. Again, like, this is all I did myself. I went from being this anxious kid at 16 who couldn't even approach anybody to making thousands of calls, and 6 years later sitting here teaching sales by learning this process. Like, I'm a bit of a nerd by nature. Like, I love maths, I love stats, I love data, and that's why I love sales, because sales is just a big maths game when you let it become that. So hopefully this video is useful. Let me know if you enjoyed it. I'm testing a few different things on this channel. So if there's any other topics, any other ideas that you want to see, drop it in the comments. I'm going to reply to every single comment as well. But hopefully this video is useful. Go make your fucking dials. I promise it will pay off. It sucks in the short term, but it's going to be great. And let me know what you thought of the video.